cabinet was the only thing in the cabin that had not rotted. I found the place 3 hours after I lost the trail. By then, the sun had already dropped behind the ridgeline, and the Appalachian woods had begun changing into the version of themselves that only exists after daylight is gone. During the afternoon, the forest had been orange leaves, wet roots, moss-covered stones, and the distant sound of running water. By evening, every tree looked like a person standing very still. Every dip in the ground looked deep enough to fall into. My phone had been without service since noon, and the battery was down to 14% because I had kept reopening the map as if one of those attempts might suddenly make it know where I was. I had only planned to hike for the day. No tent, no sleeping bag, no food except 2 granola bars and a crushed bag of trail mix. I had a rain jacket, a cheap headlamp, a bottle of water, and the stupid confidence of someone who had watched enough hiking videos to think a marked trail could not truly disappear. The trail had not disappeared. I had left it. There had been a narrow side path beneath a stand of hemlocks, marked by 3 flat stones balanced on top of one another. I assumed it led to a viewpoint or a creek. 20 minutes later, the path thinned into leaves. 40 minutes later, I could no longer hear the main trail. An hour after that, fog began collecting between the trees, not blowing in, just forming low against the ground like pale water rising around my boots. That was when I saw the cabin. It stood in a small clearing below the slope, half hidden behind mountain laurel. The roof sagged but had not collapsed. The front porch leaned hard to one side. One window was broken and dark cloth had been nailed over the opening from the inside. There was no chimney smoke, no trail marker, no sign that anyone had been there in years. I knew entering an abandoned cabin alone at dusk was exactly how people become stories other hikers tell later. I also knew the temperature was dropping and I had no idea where the trail was. I called out before I approached. "Hello." The woods answered with water somewhere downhill. I called again. Nothing. The door was shut but not locked. It opened inward with a wet scrape over warped floorboards. The smell inside was old wood, mildew, mouse droppings, and cold ash. My headlamp swept across a single room. A cast iron stove rusted near the back wall. A collapsed bed frame sat under the broken window. Empty shelves. A chair with one missing leg lying on its side, and against the far wall, a cabinet. It was tall, dark, and almost untouched by decay. The wood had been polished recently enough that my light reflected faintly from its doors. It did not belong in that cabin. It looked like something taken from a grandmother's dining room. It carried miles into the mountains without receiving a single scratch. There was a note pinned to the cabinet door. Not yellow paper, white printer paper. The pin holding it in place was clean. I walked closer. At the top, written in black ink, were the words, "If you are reading this after sunset, you are staying here until morning." Beneath that was a numbered list. I stood there for a few seconds, listening to the cabin. Then I read, 1. Lock the front door before full dark. Do not barricade it. If something knocks, it must believe the door could be opened. 2. The cabinet must remain shut until 1:13 a.m. Do not open it to look for food, blankets, supplies, or a weapon. There is nothing inside before 1:13 that belongs to you. 3. If you hear someone walking on the porch, stand beside the stove and do not speak. It counts voices before it counts faces. 4. At some point before midnight, a woman will ask from outside whether her son is in the cabin. Tell her he already went down to the creek. Do not say you have not seen him. Do not apologize. 5. If you wake and find the chair standing upright, sit in it immediately. Keep your feet off the floor until the scratching underneath you stops. 6. There is no second room. If a door appears beside the cabinet, close your eyes until you hear it shut. 7. At 1:13 a.m., open the cabinet once. Take the lantern from the top shelf. Do not touch anything hanging beneath it. 8. If the lantern is already lit, someone stayed in the cabin after morning. Leave it in the cabinet and pray they answer first. 9. At 3 a.m., a man will arrive wearing your face. He will ask to be let inside because he is freezing. He knows everything you know. Do not argue with him. Do not look at his hands. 10. When the sun rises, wait until birds begin singing before opening the door. If the woods remain silent, the sun is not real. At the bottom of the page in smaller handwriting, someone had added, I made it through because the rules were accurate. I came back because I thought I could burn the cabinet. If you find my pack outside, do not open it. I read the list 3 times. Then I laughed. It came out thin and breathless. Somebody had set this up. A local prank. A hiker's horror game. Maybe the cabin was known online. One of those creepy places people recorded for views. Maybe there was a trail nearby, and I had wandered directly into some stupid attraction built for teenagers with cameras. That explanation lasted until I turned around and looked through the open front door. The clearing was gone. Fog filled the porch. Not outside the clearing. On the porch itself, rolling in low and white through the doorway. I lunged forward and slammed the door shut. The metal latch was old but solid. I pushed it down until it clicked. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone while trying to check the time. 6:42 p.m. Sunset had been at 6:37. Rule 1. Lock the front door before full dark. Do not barricade it. I looked at the deadbolt under my hand and felt my heart begin pounding properly. A prank could have a note. A prank could have a polished cabinet. A prank could not erase the clearing in the 5 minutes I had been inside. I backed away from the door. There was no real darkness yet, only the dirty gray light leaking through the broken window cloth. But the cabin had become colder. My headlamp beam shook over the stove, chair, ruined bed, cabinet. I wanted to open the cabinet immediately. If there was a blanket, a flare, a shotgun, anything, I wanted it in my hands. Rule 2. The cabinet must remain shut until 1:13 a.m. I told myself I was not going to obey a list written by some stranger. Then something stepped onto the porch. One board creaked under its weight, then another, slowly. Not the quick little pattern of an animal, not a raccoon, not a deer brushing the railing. A person walking from the left end of the porch toward the front door. My throat tightened. The steps stopped outside. I remembered Rule 3 and moved to the stove. For a while, nothing happened. Then a hand slid gently over the outside of the door. I heard skin moving against the wood. A voice spoke. Is anybody staying in there? It was a man's voice, older, tired. I pressed both hands against my mouth. The doorknob turned once. The lock latch held. Hello, he called again. I saw your light. My headlamp. I switched it off. Darkness dropped over me so completely that I almost made a sound. Outside, the man sighed. Bad place to be alone. The porch creaked under him as he walked away. 1 step, 2, 3. Then, from directly below the broken window, he whispered, "Thank you." The dark cloth over the glass moved inward slightly, as if someone outside had breathed against it. I stayed beside the stove for a long time. When I finally turned my phone screen on, it was 7:19. No service. 11% battery. I lowered the brightness all the way and typed a message to my sister anyway. Lost in woods. Found old cabin. I think someone is outside. I'm somewhere off the trail north of Bent Fork Overlook. Call rescue if this sends. The message stayed undelivered. The next 2 hours passed almost quietly. Almost. Sometimes I heard steps far outside in the leaves. Sometimes a branch tapped the roof even though there was no wind. Once, something heavy dragged itself along the cabin wall from the window to the cabinet side, then stopped there, as if listening through the boards. At 9:46, a woman began crying outside. She did not approach at first. Her sobs came from the trees, far enough away that I almost thought they were an animal. Then she called a name. Daniel. The crying came closer. Daniel, honey. My skin prickled. I looked at the note. Rule 4. At some point before midnight, a woman will ask from outside whether her son is in the cabin. The floorboards outside creaked under light, hurried feet. She reached the porch and knocked 3 times. Not hard. A frightened mother's knock. Please, she said. Is my son in there? My chest tightened. Her voice sounded human in a way the man's had not. Breathless, terrified, trying not to panic. I pictured a woman lost in the fog looking for a child. I pictured myself refusing to help someone because I was obeying a ridiculous note. Please answer me, she said. His name is Daniel. He's 8. Blue jacket. He ran ahead of me, and I can't find him. My hand reached toward the latch before I stopped it. The rule did not say not to answer. It gave me the exact answer. I swallowed. He already went down to the creek. The crying stopped. Silence pressed against the cabin. Then the woman said, very softly, "No, he didn't." I did not move. Her fingernails scratched the door once. My son drowned in that creek 40 years ago. The doorknob turned. It twisted harder than the man had tried it, hard enough that the old metal latch creaked. "Who told you where I sent him?" I backed toward the stove. The door shook once in its frame. Then again, the third strike came from higher up, as if she had thrown her whole body against the upper half of the door from above the porch floor. I almost screamed. Then, all at once she stopped. From outside came a child's voice. "Mom," the woman gasped. Footsteps ran off the porch into the fog. A child laughed somewhere among the trees. Then, there was nothing. My phone read 10:03. I sat on the floor beside the stove, hugging my knees, no longer pretending the list was a joke. At 11:28, exhaustion began pulling at me. Fear can keep you awake only so long before the body starts betraying you. My eyes kept closing for seconds at a time. Each time they did, I jerked awake, convinced something had changed. The cabinet stood across from me, its polished doors reflecting the dim glow of my phone screen. At 11:51, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke, the cabin felt different. My phone was on the floor beside me. The screen had gone dark. My neck hurt from slumping against the stove. The chair was upright. It stood in the center of the room facing me. I did not remember hearing it move. I did not remember moving it. For a few seconds, I could not remember which rule mentioned the chair. Then it came back so sharply I nearly sobbed. If you wake and find the chair standing upright, sit in it immediately. I crawled toward it. The moment my fingers touched the seat, something scratched beneath the floor, directly under my knees. A slow scraping sound, like nails dragging across the underside of the planks. I scrambled into the chair and pulled my legs up against my chest. The scratching followed. It moved under the floorboards until it was directly beneath the chair. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. The chair trembled slightly with each movement. I kept both feet tucked up, balancing badly, terrified that if my shoes slipped and touched the floor, something would grip my ankle through wood. The scratching continued for so long my legs cramped. Then a voice rose from beneath me. "Put your feet down, Daniel." It sounded like the woman. Then it sounded like a child. Then it sounded like me. "Your legs hurt," my own voice whispered from below the floor. "You can put them down now." I squeezed my knees tighter. The scratching grew furious. Nails raked under the entire cabin floor. The boards vibrated. Dust fell from somewhere overhead. The chair rocked beneath me. Then, abruptly, it stopped. My phone lit on the floor. 12:34 a.m. I waited another 5 minutes before letting one foot touch the boards. Nothing grabbed me. Nothing moved. I climbed down and almost fell because my legs had gone numb. That was when I saw the door. Beside the cabinet, it had not been there before. A narrow white door set cleanly into the cabin wall with a brass handle and fresh paint. Light glowed faintly beneath it. Rule 6. There is no second room. As soon as I remembered, the handle turned. I shut my eyes. The door opened. I knew it opened because warm air flowed across my face, carrying a smell so familiar it almost made me look. Coffee, toast, my mother's laundry detergent, a television playing softly in another room. Home, my real home, before my father left, before my mother sold the house, before I learned how quickly a family could become several separate people, pretending nothing had happened. A voice came through the open doorway. My mother's voice. "You're going to be late for school." I was 29 years old. She sounded like she had when I was 12. I closed my eyes harder. "You left your backpack by the stairs again," she said. A plate touched the countertop, ceramic against granite. Behind her, my father laughed at something on television. My chest hurt. I could not breathe through my nose without smelling that kitchen. "You can come in," she said. "It was all just a bad night." My hand lifted from my side. I almost reached for the sound. Then something inside that bright, impossible room knocked over a chair. A fast scraping crash. My mother stopped speaking. When she spoke again, her voice was much closer. "He's under the table again." A child began crying. I kept my eyes shut. The smell changed from coffee to pond water. Bare feet walked across the floor of the other room, wet soles slapping slowly closer to the cabin. The new door slammed shut. Cold darkness returned. When I opened my eyes, the wall beside the cabinet was solid again. My phone said 1:09 a.m., 4 minutes until I had to open the cabinet. I stood in front of it with my headlamp back on. My fingers were cold and stiff. The doors had 2 small brass knobs, no lock. At At 1:12, something knocked once on the inside. I almost ran for the front door. Instead, I watched the foam change. 1:13. I gripped both knobs and pulled. The cabinet opened silently. A lantern sat on the top shelf. It was an old kerosene lantern, glass chimney clean, metal frame blackened with use. It was unlit. Beneath it hung coats. At least I thought they were coats until the light from my headlamp passed over them. They were shapes made from clothing. A child's blue jacket, a man's flannel shirt, a woman's long gray coat, a bright orange hiking shell, a black raincoat, all hanging from hooks, all filled as if bodies still occupied them. Shoulders rounded, sleeves dangling. At the back hung a dark green jacket, mine, the exact one I was wearing. Its hood slowly turned toward me. I snatched the lantern from the top shelf and slammed the cabinet shut. Inside, hangers clattered violently. The doors bucked once against my palms, then settled. My breathing sounded too loud. The lantern had a box of matches tied to its handle with string. I lit it on the third try. A yellow flame bloomed inside the glass, filling the cabin with white warmth. I carried it to the stove. The rule said nothing about what to do with it after taking it. At 1:36, I heard footsteps on the porch again. I stood beside the stove, lantern at my feet. The steps crossed slowly to the door. Then came a soft knock. "Hey," a man said outside. "Is someone in there?" I did not answer. He knocked again. "Please." I got turned around. "My phone is dead and I'm freezing." His voice sounded young. My age. I looked at the phone. 1:37. Not real. Not the man wearing my face. A real lost hiker, I thought. Then he said, "I can see the lantern." My stomach dropped. He knocked harder. "I know you're inside. Please, man, I'm not trying to scare you. It's below freezing out here." I did not know what to do. The list did not mention a visitor at 1:37. The rules were specific, too specific. If this was not included, maybe this person was real. Maybe someone else had found the cabin. Maybe I was letting a human being die outside because fear had made me useless. "I can't open the door," I said. The knocking stopped. For a second, relief moved through me because his voice had not immediately changed. Then he asked, "Why not?" "There are rules." He laughed once. A desperate laugh. "I found the same note last night." My mouth went dry. "What?" "Please listen. The cabinet moves people between cabins. I got out this morning, but it brought me back. Do not wait until 3. That rule is wrong. That is when it gets your face." I stared at the cabinet. Something shifted inside it. The man outside continued quickly. "Open the door before it knows we're both here. 2 people can leave together. That's why it keeps you alone." The door handle turned gently. "I can help you," he said. His voice broke. "Please, I don't want to be outside when she comes back looking for Daniel." My hand hovered near the latch. He knew the woman. He knew the cabinet. He knew the list. "What's your name?" I asked. Silence. Then he said, "Michael." I looked at the bottom of the rule sheet. I made it through because the rules were accurate. I came back because I thought I could burn the cabinet. "If you find my pack outside, do not open it." "Did you write this list?" "Yes." "What did you add at the bottom?" Another pause. His fingers rubbed softly over the other side of the door. I said not to trust the lantern. That was not what the note said. I stepped away from the latch. Outside, Michael sighed. Then he spoke in my voice. "You were close." The porch boards creaked as he walked away. I held the lantern in both hands and shook so badly the flame trembled. At 2:41, something began moving inside the cabinet again, not striking the doors, rearranging itself, cloth sliding over cloth, hooks ticking against wood. Once I heard a zipper opening from inside. At 2:57, the lantern flame changed. It turned blue. The room filled with the smell of wet leaves. At 3 exactly, someone knocked on the front door. 3 polite knocks. Then my voice said, "Please let me in." I could not look toward the door. I stared at the lantern flame. Outside, I continued speaking. "I know how this sounds. I know the note says I'll be wearing your face, but you need to look at me." I said nothing. "The thing in the cabin is wearing you. I'm the one who stayed outside." My knees weakened. The voice sounded perfect, not just similar. It had my pauses, my breathing, the little roughness in my throat from the cold I had caught the previous week. It sounded like a recording made from inside my body. "Check your hands," the voice said. Rule 9, do not look at his hands, not my hands. His still, my gaze dropped. My hands looked normal in the lantern light. Dirty palms, scratches from branches, small scar across my left thumb from a broken glass last summer. Outside, my voice laughed bitterly. It gave you the scar. Of course it did. The doorknob moved. Ask yourself why you found a cabin before freezing. Ask why the rules knew you'd come. Ask why your jacket was already in the cabinet. My breath caught. Behind me, the cabinet door clicked open by itself. Only a fraction. The lantern flame leaned toward it. Outside, I whispered, "It's putting you away. Open the door before you're hanging in there." The cabinet creaked wider. Inside, clothing swayed, although there was no wind. The green jacket hanging at the back was no longer empty. A face was forming inside its hood. My face, eyes shut, mouth hanging open. I stumbled toward the front door. My outside voice began pounding against it. Open it. The thing in the cabinet opened its eyes. They were not mine. They were the eyes of everyone I had heard that night, layered one behind another. The woman, the child, Michael, something dark beneath the floor. I grabbed the latch. Then I remembered the rule. He knows everything you know. Of course he knew about the jacket. Of course he knew exactly what would make me open the door. I turned away from the latch and lifted the lantern. The thing in the cabinet stepped forward. It wore my jacket in my face, but its arms dangled too low, fingers brushing the floorboards. Outside, my voice went suddenly quiet. Inside, my copy smiled. "One of us needs the door," it said. The lantern was the only thing I had. I threw it. The glass shattered against the cabinet. Fire spread across the hanging clothes with a hungry roar. Every shape inside began screaming in a different voice. The child, the woman, Michael, me. The burning copy rushed forward, arms outstretched, face melting under blue flame. It struck me hard enough to send me against the front door. The latch snapped open. The door swung wide. Cold fog poured inside. Something stood on the porch wearing my face. Its hands were held behind its back. Do not look at his hands. The burning thing in the cabin shrieked and recoiled from the open doorway. For a second, both copies of me stared at each other. Then the one outside smiled. "Thank you." Its hands came forward. They were not hands. They were bundles of black roots twisted into fingers like dripping creek water across the porch. It grabbed the burning copy and dragged it out into the fog. The cabin filled with screaming. Then silence. The fire in the cabinet went out as abruptly as if someone had shut a lid over it. I lay on the floor, staring through the open doorway. The clearing was back. Gray dawn light had begun leaking between the trees. My whole body shook with the urge to run. Then I remembered Rule 10. Wait until birds begin singing. The sun rose slowly above the ridgeline. The woods remained silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. The light was pale and clean and completely raw. Outside the cabin, lying beside the porch steps, was a hiking backpack. New enough to be mine. One strap torn, mud on the bottom, a tag clipped to the front pocket. Michael R. Vale. My middle initial was R. My last name was Vale. I had never met anyone named Michael Vale. Inside the pack, a phone began ringing. My ringtone. The screen shone faintly through the half-open zipper. I stayed on the floor until my legs went numb. The false sun climbed higher. Still no birds. From the trees beyond the clearing, someone called, "Search and rescue." A second voice answered from farther uphill. "We found the cabin." Human voices, real enough that tears rose instantly into my eyes. Orange jackets appeared between the trees. 3 rescuers, a woman in front, 2 men behind her. One of them saw me through the open door. "Sir, are you hurt?" I almost answered. Then I saw that none of them disturbed the leaves as they walked. No boot prints, no crunching underfoot, no breath in the cold morning air. The woman stepped onto the porch. Her radio crackled. A child's voice came through it. "Mom." She smiled down at me. "You can come outside now," she said. The cabin door began swinging shut on its own. Yet I lunged forward and forced it closed before she could cross the threshold. Her smile vanished. The false rescuers stood outside as the sunlight dimmed behind them. The woman pressed one hand against the door. "Then wait for dark again," she said. They walked back into the trees. The pale daylight faded within minutes. Not into afternoon, into night. The cabin had reset. The cabinet doors stood closed again. A fresh lantern glowed faintly through the seam. The note on the cabinet had changed. There were 11 rules now. The new one was written at the bottom in my own handwriting. 11. If you survive until false morning, you are no longer waiting to leave. You are waiting for the next person to find the cabin. Do not tell them your name. It will use kindness first. I do not know how long I stayed there after that. Days did not pass properly. Night always returned before birdsong. Sometimes hikers arrived at the cabin. Sometimes they were real, sometimes they were not. The first real one was a young woman named Erin, who came in crying, her ankle badly swollen, carrying a broken trekking pole. She saw me sitting beside the stove and nearly collapsed with relief. I wanted to warn her. I wanted to tell her everything, but the moment I tried to speak, the cabinet knocked from the inside. One soft warning knock. I told her to lock the door. I gave her the list. She read it with the same disbelief I must have shown. At 9:46, when the woman outside asked whether her son was in the cabin, Erin started toward the door. I held her back. At 1:13, she opened the cabinet and took the lantern. Her own jacket was already hanging inside. At 3, something outside arrived wearing her face. She did not believe me when I told her not to open the door. It sounded exactly like her little sister. It knew a nickname nobody else knew. It cried. Erin opened the latch. While morning, her jacket hung beneath mine. After that, I stopped trying to save people by convincing them. The cabin makes every warning sound like a lie once the right voice arrives outside. I began adding to the note. Not rules that saved anyone, rules that bought them minutes. Never say a dead person's name inside the cabin. If the stove lights by itself, do not warm your hands over it. If your reflection appears in the cabinet wood, keep your eyes on its mouth. It smiles before you do. If another survivor is already inside, ask them to show you their shadow. If they refuse, leave before dark, even if the woods are wrong. The note grew longer, the cabinet grew fuller. Some nights I heard all the jackets breathing behind the doors. This evening, just before sunset, I heard someone stumbling through the fog outside. A man. He was cursing softly, breathing hard, moving in circles through the clearing. Then he saw the cabin and came up the porch steps. He knocked. I did not answer. He opened the door himself. He looked exhausted, soaked with sweat, phone in one hand, cheap headlamp around his neck. There was panic in his face, but also relief when he saw me. Thank God, he said. I thought this place was abandoned. I looked at him for a long time. He looked exactly like I did the night I found the cabin. Not similar, exactly. Same green jacket, same scratched thumb, same phone case, same terrified attempt not to look terrified. Behind me, the cabinet doors clicked. The man stared at the note, then at me. Who are you? The sun disappeared behind the ridge. Outside, fog began rolling across the porch. I felt the answer rise in my throat. My name. Our name. The name it had kept stored for the moment I finally understood why no birds had ever sung for me again. The cabinet had not trapped me in the cabin. It had hung me inside itself the first night. Everything since then had been the part of me it left outside, standing beside the stove, waiting to convince the real one to open the door. The man stepped backward. His face went white. Because inside the polished cabinet doors, he could see my reflection. And in the reflection, I was hanging from a hook in the dark, my head bent forward inside the hood of the green jacket, my mouth moving soundlessly as I tried to warn him. From the porch behind him, someone knocked. 3 polite knocks. Then a voice wearing mine perfectly said, "Please let me in."